May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our God, our strength, and our Redeemer. Amen. By this, everyone will know you are my disciples if you have love for one another. If you have love for one another. This short verse at the end of our gospel lesson this evening sums up what Maundy Thursday is all about. Maundy Thursday is about Jesus demonstrating love. Love shared, love in the shared meal of the Last Supper. Love shared in the act, the selfless act of washing his disciples' feet. These two themes of Maundy Thursday, the Last Supper and the foot washing, sometimes compete with each other for attention. They almost work against each other, one trying to draw our attention from the other. Preachers and scholars from time to time only help to reinforce this tension. I'm sure you've probably heard sermons in the past that declare that Maundy Thursday is about the Last Supper and Jesus instituting the Holy Eucharist. We hear it in the collect for the day. I'm sure you've probably read something that says, yes, the setting is only incidental. This is about Jesus showing us how to be a servant. But I want to suggest they're both. I want to suggest that, yes, Maundy Thursday is about the institution of the Holy Eucharist, but yes, it is also about demonstrating what true servanthood looks like. Both of those things are rooted in love. Both of those things are rooted in Jesus' unwavering and unconditional love for his friends. John tells us in this gospel account, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. If you knew that your time had come to go to the Father, what would you do? Would you gather those closest to you, your family and your friends, and share a meal? That's what Jesus did. John doesn't spend much time describing that meal, but the other synoptic gospels do. The other gospel writers all say that Jesus takes bread. He gives thanks. He breaks the bread and he shares it with his friends. A gathering rooted in love. One much like the one that most of us, if not all of us, probably hope to imitate in our last hours. But that's not all Jesus does in this lesson, though. In the midst of this sacred time, in the midst of this holy meal that will be imitated throughout the generations, Jesus does something that boggles the minds of all of the people that were there. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the feet of his disciples and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. For us, this foot washing is a symbolic act. Outside of the context of Maundy Thursday, I would venture a guess that we would never have the occasion to touch each other's feet. But for the folks at that dinner, the folks that were gathered there at that sacred time, in that sacred place for that sacred meal, saw this as the act of a slave, as a true act of servanthood. Something that a teacher, a healer, a prophet, something that the Messiah, the Son of God, shouldn't be doing. But Jesus does. Jesus in this gospel lesson shows us what to do to show love for one another. But more importantly, he shows us the posture to take when we do it. To wash someone's feet, you have to put yourself in a position of submission. You have to give all of yourself in order to wash another's feet. The lectionary makes an interesting editorial choice tonight. If you notice, the text jumps from verse 17 to verse 31. Now, what it skips is Jesus' foretelling of Judas's betrayal and of Peter's denial. Imagine showing that kind of love in the face of this kind of trauma, the trauma of betrayal, the trauma of denial, the emotional and relational turmoil that Jesus must be experiencing. Make no mistake, Jesus shows us in breaking bread and serving others in the face of that trauma. This is a new way of doing things. I can imagine that had the disciples been in that position, if any of us had faced that same kind of trauma, we wouldn't have been able to show that kind of love for one another. But Jesus does. Jesus loves them and commands us to do the same. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples. But how do we love from a distance? How do we serve each other from afar? How do we keep Jesus' commandment in our time of shared trauma, of isolation and uncertainty? Unfortunately, I don't know. I don't have a list. I can't tell you to go do X, Y, and Z because I don't know what X, Y, and Z really are. I've seen some things that it might be, though. It might be people making face masks for folks that have run out of them. It might be people cheering on healthcare workers on their way into the hospital or after a long shift. It might be social media. Social media is turning into something that it always could have been. A place of shared lament, a place of shared victories, a place of support. Dare I say, a place of love? I don't know exactly what to tell you to do, but I know one thing for a fact. Jesus calls us to a new way of life. Jesus calls us to a new way of living, a new way of loving, a way that takes that trauma, the trauma of his betrayal and his denial, the trauma of our isolation and uncertainty, and leaves it. It leaves it at the foot of the cross, and it transforms it into love. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another.